Are we all ready to start then?
Yes.
All right. Then I'd like to officially call to order the June 30th, 2020 meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission, and pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, subsection 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. This public meeting of the Town of Bolton Board Conservation Commission is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can access this meeting while in progress by Zoom video communications. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by telephone, cell phone, or personal computer using Zoom. That said, we will, as always, start with a roll call. I am Brian Barabee.
Laura Stevenson.
William Payne.
Jeff Bryan.
Emily Winter.
And Rebecca Longvall. Quickly, just some guidelines. As we go through the meeting, please utilize the chat or raise hand function to address the board. I will be monitoring that throughout the meeting, at which point the board chair, which is Brian, will be notified that you would like to speak, or I will relay that to him and he will point you out when you're able to provide comment. Please remain on mute until you have been addressed by the board chair, just to allow for the bandwidth to function properly. And as I already stated, and I appreciate you correcting it, participants are required to display their legal first and last name. So I appreciate your compliance with that as we move through the meeting. Brian.
Okay. Are we good?
Yes.
All right. So the Bolton Conservation Commission will now continue the public hearing under the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 131, the Wetlands Protection Act, and the Bolton Bylaw, Chapter 233, for an after-the-fact filing of a notice of intent for 175 Fox Run Road. Rebecca, do you have an update? I
do. We have received the DEP file number, which is 1120688. The only comment that was received by the analyst was, it states, Mass DEP recommends that restoration work and plans in response to a violation should be addressed through the enforcement order, which is what we are doing. And with that, I'm going to unmute David because I believe he had a few comments to make.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. I come to you from a swamp in Wilmington at the moment. I don't know if you guys can see around me.
Yep.
Swamp azalea. Yes, so as of the last hearing, we had presented a restoration plan, which I think was widely accepted by the commission. There were three items that I wanted to address tonight. One is that we have received our DEP file number, which administratively was the reason that we couldn't close and vote to issue a order of conditions on the restoration plan. And there's two plan changes that I'd like to bring forth to the commission. And these were brought about as the applicants have actually reached out to 4 different companies to execute the work. And 2 of the companies came at recommendations of mine. They're highly reputable companies that are not your local landscape contractors. They're ecological restoration specific companies. One is Parteri Ecological out of Cambridge, and the other company is Essex Horticulture out of Danvers. And they called me and asked me some questions about the plans in terms of some of the methodology that I included. And they have some credible points. One is that the size of shrubs and trees that I put in the plan were based on a 3-foot height. And as they pointed out to me, plants at nurseries are never really sold that way. And it's typically what's called a 3-gallon pot size, which has the root structure. So the plants at time of planting may be less than 3 feet, but 3-gallon pot size is what I'd like to amend the the plan to detail. I don't think that's a great change, but it is a change, and I wanted to bring it to the attention of the Conservation Commission. Do you guys have any thoughts on that one before I move to the next?
Actually, I think it's a better idea because you get a better understanding of the root size as opposed to you could have a 3-foot plant in a 1-gallon pot.
Yep.
You know, so you actually are getting a better idea of what you're getting for a plant.
That is, and that's the way that any of these companies would provide a cost estimate in the way that they're sold at nurseries. So it would put them at a disadvantage of having to walk around looking for a plant height. So that's, I mean, I think it's a shortcoming on my part, if anything, and I apologize for that. I think this is a better methodology in the way that standard landscape plans are done. So the second item that I wanted to bring about was the contractors, shortly before their violation, they had applied lawn grass. One of the reasons they came to you before violation was they had a landscape contractor out there that was applying turf lawn, and they applied new loam to that area. My concern was getting rid of the turf lawn, and as I carried in my specifications, that they would actually strip the turf lawn off using like a bobcat or an excavator, and then they would come back and install 2 to 3 inches of clean loam or organic soils. And in conversations with Parteri and Essex Horticulture, they said that that's not really a good method. They said that they would prefer to just come in and till what's there, and by tilling it, it should eradicate the turf lawn that's out there, and then they would apply the seed mix and put the erosion, it's seed germination blankets over the top of it. I don't discredit that is also a good methodology. It would also represent some cost savings to the client and not having to do the earthwork and the associated with it. And I mentioned it to Rebecca earlier. Again, this would carry the same performance standards either way. I anticipate that in your order of conditions that you would have such criteria that this would be monitored for 2 full growing seasons, and that the performance standard would be that within 2 full growing seasons, the seed mix that the species we're observing in there are no less than 80% vegetative cover. That's about the point at which you consider it to be finally stabilized. And B, the plant species composition growing out of there would be the native seed mix and not the turf lawn. And of course, the client understands that if it doesn't meet the performance standards, there's always opportunity to come back and do corrective action. And if at that time they need to strip it and put topsoil down, they could. But it represents a change that I would have to modify in the plans, and I wanted to run it by the commission. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm debating right now. I don't have thoughts offhand. I'm actually curious to hear Rebecca's thoughts on this one, the difference between till. I can understand the cost savings.
Yep.
And if it's going to give us a similar result, a similar endpoint in a similar time frame, I would be fine with that. But I'm curious to hear what Rebecca thinks, or if you have strong feelings one way or the other.
So first and foremost, as far as the cost savings go, that's out of the jurisdiction of the commission. It just needs to be restored. So that's sort of a moot point in my mind. But
Yes.
outside of that, as long as, and I can see how it would, and including, as you were describing, David, a condition, as we talked about that 75%, whether it's 2 years or 2 full growing seasons that the commission chooses, to also tag in there the fact that it's going to be native vegetation and not the turf lawn. And I think that would cover it and allow for a successful growth just from the tilling. And I think it may create a better growing substrate if you're tilling the natural soil with the loam that's already there. And then I also agree with the change of the 3-gallon pot size versus the 3 foot in height, because that's how most wholesales list their plants. So it's a little bit more straightforward.
Thank you.
Other questions from commission members? Rebecca, any other questions or thoughts you have on other parts of this project, or
I do. The property owner did take it upon themselves to monument the conservation restriction boundary with some arborvitae, maybe some sort of shrub. I didn't take a close look at them. And I think we either need to add to that or we need to suggest memorializing that in a different manner. In the past, the commission has allowed boulders. The commission has allowed a split rail fence. The commission has allowed plantings of native shrubs along that boundary line. But obviously, this is an issue. We dealt with it once, and I think memorializing it in a natural way that won't cause too much of a issue with the property owners, then it's there, it's permanently documented on the plans, and the commission has the ability to keep it as a perpetuitous condition into the future once they do request a certificate of compliance for the work when it's restored.
Yes, and we're in agreement to that. And I think that one of the reasons that, and I brought up that we didn't mention this at the last hearing, we just forgot to talk about it, is that we anticipate there to be some monumentation of the conservation restriction in perpetuity. And I wanted to, because the property is subject to purchase and sale, was to afford, if there's options for whether or not it's stone or whether or not it's a hedgerow, to afford them opportunity to sort of select which methodology would be appropriate. I don't know if the Peters are in attendance this evening.
The
I talked to
Peters
them earlier.
are, and then I have a sorry, I'm not gonna say your last name right, I
Yep.
apologize. Matsuo
yeah.
and Jess Wagner.
I don't know who they are. I don't know if they're some of the landscape, because they, like I said, they sent this out to bid to 3 or 4 different companies.
Okay.
It may be some of the companies vetting this.
Okay.
But I don't know if Mark and Linda want to speak. I don't know if they need to, but if they wanted to afford opportunity to, whether or not they think stone would be more appropriate, like boulders versus a hedgerow of shrubs. And if they did do shrubs, like what off-center spacing those would have to be. I think that we would agree that the 3 that are out there now are a little far spaced and don't really monument it. I would expect it to be something at shorter distance spacing.
Yeah, you'd probably double or triple the amount of monuments you have out there.
Well, I did have a.
You gotta raise your hand or something.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mark, we can
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts, a few thoughts actually. First of all, I understand the need for a monument and no objection as far as what can go there. I mean, assuming the buyer doesn't, want to do something that's exorbitant in cost. I mean, I'd be amenable to yielding to what, I mean, since they're the ones that have to live with it, if they wanted to choose stones or bushes or whatever, I'd be amenable to that. The only other thing I did want to mention, as I understand it, appears to be a right-of-way. I mean, I've always known there was a right-of-way because not the neighbors next to us, the 2 houses, the one next to us and the one beyond that, the only way to access their wells is through our backyard. So as I understand this print, it looks like that right-of-way to access their wells goes right through that monumented area. So I just wanted to point that out in case that impacts what we do there.
So I would then probably suggest, if you're gonna put in a fence, put in a split rail fence because it's easily taken apart. Additionally, shrubbery will allow for the same spacing, and the same thing with boulders. I apologize, my dogs are barking.
So I think that's, I think we'd be amenable. I don't know how to
Okay.
reconcile that. I think we like to be in a position where we can close the public hearing and pending a couple of minor plan revisions, which, I would make the recommendation that you conditionally vote to issue an order of condition pending the revisions that I just noted, which
Yeah.
I can have turned around and stamped and submitted tomorrow or the next day. But some way to have in the order of conditions, a condition that states that we will memorialize the boundary and maybe what our options are, whether it be the fence or boulders.
Sure. So
How do you think we can reconcile it?
I would agree with the permanent monumentation of the conservation boundary to be determined prior to the start of restoration work, something to that nature. But again, we want to make sure that that's included right away versus at the end and people say, oh, we don't have enough funding or so. I don't want to hear it. We need to get it done. Additionally, so the commission's next meeting is next Tuesday. So I would need the plans by Thursday. And the issue is that we can't vote because we would need to close. And if we close, we can't consider any new documentation.
Great.
So the good situation is, like I said, because we added an extra meeting in June. So we have meeting next week versus 2 weeks away. And the deadline for that material would be the Thursday prior, which would be this Thursday at noon. And as long as you can submit the plans by then, I'm sure the commission, if they have no issues this evening, would just be able to vote, and it wouldn't probably be necessary for you to even attend.
Yep, I agree. I think that's, I think that the Peters essentially, in terms of timescale, I think we've already discussed that this is likely to be executed in the fall, given the fact that we're under declared drought, that I think it would be a disservice to execute this now. So they have time, but they do want to get under contract with the landscape contractor. So as long as tonight, if you guys don't have issue with us tilling and applying seed versus stripping and applying topsoil, and if you guys are amenable to changing 3 gallon or 3 foot height to 3 gallon pots, then I think that they're safe to proceed with letting their contractors bid on that sort of standard. And as a formality, we can follow up with the process and come in for the next hearing for a vote and a close.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on the key points that I had written down that we had talked about. The other one too, just being the delineation of the conservation restriction. I would be fine. I'll ask other commission members too. I'd be fine if you left it open, if you wrote in options, but left it open to say that it will be delineated by either boulder, split rail fence, or hedgerow.
Hedgerow.
Yep. To build in, viable options. Those are 3 options that we're usually fine with. If you come up with a 4th, throw it in there too. I would be fine with that. And of course, the 75% viability of the plantings over the course of 2 growing seasons.
I mean, if I could I jump in for a minute?
Please.
I mean, if making a decision now is going to help to expedite this, I mean, I would just be happy to go with, bushes.
Yeah, no, I'm saying to put it in the finalized plan, you can leave yourself those options in the finalized plan and make that decision later, as long as it's one of those 3.
Okay, so it's not gonna hold
affect
any.
us, approving or getting out the rest of the plans.
Okay.
So
It doesn't paint you into a corner.
Correct. Yeah. If you change your mind in a month, that's fine, as long as you use one of those options.
So Mark, just to clarify, so David's going to take what we talked about this evening, so long as the commission has no issues with it, update the plans so we have it documented and memorialized in the plans what is going to occur. He's going to change up those details that we discussed and then submit them before noon on Thursday. And then the commission will vote on July 7th, which is next Tuesday. Because at this current time, if we close and the commission votes, we wouldn't be able to incorporate the details that we just talked about. And it seems that those would be more viable for your project. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
So that all said, those are my questions, thoughts, concerns. With those things added, I would be fine with it. I'd have no problem. No further questions that I can think of. Does anybody else on the commission have questions right now? Rebecca, is anybody here from the public to comment on this?
Let's see. Nope, I see no hands raised.
July 7th is our next meeting,
Yep,
and do
and
we
this would
have
be 7:15.
7:15? Perfect. And can I ask the applicant, is it all right if we continue it? We just need to continue with your permission.
Go ahead, David.
Oh, Mark, I was just gonna say, yeah, no, I think that this won't slow you guys down at all. You guys are pretty safe to proceed with getting cost estimates, and this would be administrative at the next hearing. So it's my advice to permit continuance.
The only other thing I'd say is to extend an invitation to Delhi if he wanted to jump in with any thoughts or comments, the buyer of the property.
And especially in terms of what he might prefer as the,
Yeah, I am like you, Mark. I'm open to any suggestion, and if we have a preference, will be probably the shrub. So it's more natural versus the plants or anything like that. But again, we don't have any strong opposition to any other solution presented.
Very good.
Perfect.
Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments you wanted to add, or?
No, I think everything seems to be in place, and if the committee is happy, we're more than happy.
All right. We look forward to meeting you in person one of these days, hopefully.
Thank you.
same.
Okay,
Great.
so that's it. I'd like to make a motion that we continue the public hearing for the notice of intent for 175 Fox Run till our next meeting, Tuesday, July 7th at 7:15 p.m.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, and I'll go with an
call.
original roll call. Lori Stevenson,
Aye.
Bill Payne,
Aye.
Kip McNamara,
Aye.
Jeff Bryant,
Aye.
Emily Winter,
Aye.
and I'm an I myself.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Be well, everybody. All
Thank you.
right. Bye.
Night.
Okay. Want to mute everyone, one moment.
Please.
Okay,
See, I did have a chance to review the June 16, 2020 minutes, and I didn't have any issues with those.
okay.
16 ones. I get those. The 6-2 meeting, we actually have the people that are here for that, correct?
We have everyone here tonight, so thank you all for attending.
We really do. Wow. Did people have a chance to look at the minutes from both 6-2 and 6-16? And if so, were there any questions, problems, corrections to it?
Not for me.
Look good.
No issues.
In that case, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes for our June 2nd, 2020 and June 16th, 2020 meetings as submitted. Do I hear a second? All right.
Second.
All those in favor? Lori Stevenson,
Aye.
Bill Payne,
Aye.
Kip McNamara,
Aye.
Jeff Bryant,
Aye.
Emily Winter,
Aye.
and I'm an I myself.
Woo. Thank you.
do you want to give us an update, Rebecca, on MVP, or is there an order you would prefer to go in for updates?
No, that's fine. So the MVP preparedness program, as far as the planning portion, is complete. We are waiting for final word from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs regarding our MVP title. But the final report has been posted to the town's climate adaptation page. If you visit the Town of Bolton website, then navigate to the conservation page, and then on the left-hand panel of persistent links, that is where you will find the climate adaptation page. And that's really the MVP update. We still have an opening for the volunteer land steward position, so applications are welcome, although we do have some wonderful volunteers who are still helping us. We did get one piece of mail. I'm skipping and then going back. We did get one piece of mail. It was for registering or paying dues rather for this year's MACC subscription per se and membership. There is a reminder that they're hoping to host a fall conference again, not just the annual conference. So keep an eye out for that as well. I'll send emails as I receive them regarding that conference. And the exciting news we have, the Taggart acquisition project has passed with a majority at annual town meeting on June 22nd and passed the election on, or the ballot question with a yes vote yesterday. So we will be moving forward with that. We did let the property owner know about those results and that we're excited to progress through that. At the next meeting, I will be asking the commission to vote on a few things related to that, including use of the conservation fund. Again, even though you already established it, we do want to memorialize it, and to apply for 2 grants that will be coming up, because as we had stated in the article, and as I've stated this whole time, we are going to obviously pursue grants to reduce that cost to the town even further. And we will do our best. Additionally, thank you, Brian, for getting up and speaking on behalf of the Conservation Commission during town meeting. And thank you to other members of the public as well who decided to stand up and speak in favor of the acquisition, and for everyone who shared via social media, etc. It really takes a team. So without that, it probably would not have been as successful. So we do appreciate that. And lastly, the conservation property updates. I went out to post some signage for the Tom Denny Nature Camp at our Bower Springs kiosk. When I got there, not only was the field mowed, and it's not supposed to be mowed in its entirety yet, there were also about 8 vehicles parked in the field. So I went down and I spoke to the director of the camp, and I said this wasn't approved. I did iron out the mowing situation. There was a miscommunication, unfortunately, and we've dealt with that aspect, and it didn't have to do with the camp directly. Additionally, the parking, I made her aware that the commission approved the 3 tents, which I had relayed to her previously, so they didn't need any vehicles down there except for 1 or 2 for emergency purposes, as was communicated to me. She has since asked that, since the Board of Health is allowing her to have 2 tents and the vehicles parked in the field, she asked that I come back and ask the commission if that were appropriate. I stated the commission was comfortable with the vehicles parking in the parking area and having 2 vehicles where we had previously discussed so that you could then move kids if necessary to those vehicles in an emergency circumstance, but also reminded her that that's what the purpose of the tents were. And that's what was relayed to me. So now this was a last minute change that she has asked me to bring before you all. So the question ultimately is the commission comfortable with reducing the number of tents from 3 to 2 and allowing multiple vehicles to park in the field?
How many cars?
That's it. Can we
There was
define
8
multiple
cars
vehicles?
today.
Huh?
8.
8,
8? Seems
yes,
like a lot.
yes.
Suppose it rains. Be a little bit muddy down there, wouldn't it?
Yep.
I mean, I think I'd be fine with either the original 3 tents and 2 cars, or if you want to go with 2 tents and 3 cars, that's fine. But I think 8's starting to get up there.
So the issue is they needed the 3 tents versus the 1 because of the safety measures they're required to have under Board of Health, and additionally the safety measures under Board of Health for COVID. So they either need multiple vehicles that can hold the same amount of children that can hold the tent, or they can have the tent.
In
And
that
then-
case,
yeah.
I'd probably be more comfortable with a tent on that property.
Yep.
But
Yeah, I would be too. I think that's
Cheers,
probably
cheers.
better. Tent, at least you're not having cars drive all over the field. And, you know.
Okay. So can the commission take a vote to some extent of, or even, well, not
I think we already
because
I
you
think
already
just-
voted.
stick with
So
the
you-
one we already voted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did they change it? Why did they change the number of cars? They just down there working, or they decided?
Jeff, I was told that the tent cost $6,000.
No.
So they had asked, they had asked Board of Health not come back to the commission and asked, and the Board of Health said, yes, you can have cars instead of the tent for emergency circumstances. And I also relayed to the director that it's a conservation property and they're utilizing the property and it should be for conservation purposes, and everything else is secondary to an extent. We don't let anyone else use the property for any sort of event, any sort of, we don't let anyone utilize the property for events or for events that collect funds. And the Bolton Conservation Trust is a wonderful partner and we've always wanted to keep that relationship, but the Board of Health may require things just like on our permits that the Conservation Commission either does or does not allow. And that's just one of the unfortunate situations.
Sorry. So what are the cars for? Cars are for in case somebody gets sick and they have to drive away and gets hurt? No.
So the vehicles are for if there is thunder and lightning,
Oh.
so they can put the kids in the vehicles.
And somewhere safe. Oh.
Right. And today.
And that's what the tent's for too?
Yes. When I was out on the property, they just had training, so they just had staff there with that amount of vehicles. So I don't know if it's more or less with the kids there. I assume it would be more or the same, or the 3 tents. So that's just the question is the commission comfortable with vehicles or with the tent that was previously approved?
Whatever was approved, we should, it may sound cruel, but we should stand by the guns unless there's a better reason for it, I think. you know. I know they have to have cars there in case somebody really hurts themselves and they have to go to the
Right.
hospital.
Yeah,
But-
like Brian said, like one
Yeah,
to
one or
two,
two.
1 to 3 maybe.
3 at the most, it would seem to me, but.
Yeah.
How many kids are there all, yeah, anyway. What we all agreed on before, which was, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the tent was fine. I think just stick with it. If they need an additional car, I think that's probably, you know, justifiable. 8 cars from 2 seems like a lot. That's a 300% jump. And
So is the jump to the 8 cars a safety? Is this because they feel it's safer than being in a tent during a lightning storm, or is this a money issue?
Money.
Okay.
Yep. And so that's what I inquired to as well. I said, why are the vehicles here? What's the purpose of them? She said, well, we're unloading things, but also we're expecting thunderstorms. So the second tent's gonna go here, and we talked to Board of Health, and they said, we can avoid the third tent if we put the vehicles there.
They
Okay.
can't rent the bus
Now,
for a week.
I'm
The
sorry,
only-
what?
Sorry. Lori, go
Listen,
ahead. Sorry.
I didn't know if they could rent a bus, you know, school bus and not using them. Is there some that they can just bring down there at the beginning of it, park it, and that way it's not something they're purchasing, it's not moving?
I can ask.
I think it's, I guess, I think we can be a little sensitive about cost because I'm assuming that they're not accepting as many campers this year due to social distancing, right? So I think a lot of these places, no?
I was told that they, by Board of Health and the director of the camp, that they're able to have the same, whether people are actually
Sure.
signing up to that or not, but that they're quite capable and able to carry out camp with the precautionary measures and policies in place with the same amount of their typical camp roster.
So what is our concern with having more vehicles on the field?
So vehicles drip, like Brian said, if it
Right.
gets wet and they're out when it's wet, that's what it sounds like. If it's thundering and lightning, most likely accompanied by rain. Now you have damage to the field itself, which actually shouldn't have been mowed. That's a
Okay.
separate issue. And what we allowed to be mowed was the corner where the tent's gonna go, so it leaves for minimal parking.
Right.
So really it's just damage to the field,
Okay.
which could be more obvious if it had not just been mowed
Right.
out of season.
Okay.
So what are the commission's thoughts?
I would stick to the 3 tents,
Right.
honestly.
Okay.
So if we're sticking to what we've already decided upon, we really don't need to vote.
No.
But I will just put it out there. Does anybody have a dissenting opinion to that or a different view or want us to vote or look towards doing something different?
And I would say if it's an issue of money because they don't have as many applicants, then they shouldn't need the 3rd tent, right? So is that a reasonable?
Yep.
I guess. I was trying to think about just the cost based on what camps are facing this summer. But
I
I'm
agree.
thinking that if there's fewer registrants, then they don't need as many tents to begin with. So it should kind of balance out in the end.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
okay.
Any other good updates?
I don't, Keith Miles for the Miles Conservation Property did contact me, and we had approved that at the last meeting, once it's reviewed by council regarding the conservation restriction. So he is raring to go, and I did get him back in touch with the Conservation Trust so that he's able to figure out his next steps. So hopefully that will be wrapped up in the next few months as well. But that's it, aside from updates.
Excellent. All right. Anybody else have anything outstanding to add? Excellent. I will say too, Rebecca, you were really kind. You mentioned a lot of people about working on the Taggart property earlier, and that it really was a team effort. There were a lot of great people in town, a lot of volunteers that made it come together. But with team effort, somebody needs to captain that team. And the one person you didn't mention is yourself, because you're modest and decent. But you really did. You kind of captained it. I try not to celebrate until we have like title in hand. But you really led this charge, and thank you. Like I appreciate it. I hope the entire town appreciates. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And that said, I'd like to make a motion to officially adjourn the Tuesday, June 30th meeting of the Bolton Conservation Commission.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, we'll start with Lori Stevenson.
Aye.
Bill Payne. Oh, Bill abstains. Kip McNamara.
Aye.
Jeff Bryant.
Aye.
Emily Winter.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well. I think by majority we can go ahead and adjourn.
Yep.
We'll see everybody next week. If
Have a
not
nice
before.
4th of July, everybody.
All right, take care.
Have a good weekend. Stay
Night.
safe.
Hi, everyone.